Welcome back to the Investing Markets and Money podcast, brought to you by the Armchair Trader. This week we are catching up with Nano One, a company that we have been following very closely over the last few years, and where we have never a month passes without further positive developments. And joining us on the podcast, we have CEO Dan Blondal. Welcome back, Dan.
Great. Nice to be here. Thank you, Stuart.
So Nano One, for those who are not familiar with it, is a specialist in the development of battery materials. We have done previous podcasts on the channel with Dan, so anyone wants a bit more background on the company, I encourage you to revisit those interviews as well, or also go to the Armchair Trader website, where there's a considerable amount of detail on the company, which you can read there. Really what I thought I would do this morning is just kick off with some updates on the company, because since Dan joined us on the last podcast, there's been quite a lot of happening with the business. I know on the last podcast, Dan, when you joined us last time, we had a brief discussion about Worley Chemitic and the partnership you guys have announced with them. I wondered if we could quickly just kick off with a summary of what that involves for you and any progress you've had with that partnership since we last spoke. I think last time we discussed it, you had just announced it, but I just wanted to see if there's any further development there.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a quick description of what it is. I think as some of your listeners will recall, our one-pot process for making a cathode material, specifically LFP, eliminates all of the kind of water waste and sulfate waste that's typically generated. We do PCAM and CAM together, and by eliminating those waste streams, we enable the ability to build a modular system that doesn't require any extra permitting or extra engineering, custom engineering. And that's really what brought Worley and Nano One together, because we solve a really fundamental problem. It's very hard to grow the PCAM and CAM business outside of China because of the permitting challenges. And by addressing that, we're able to make this modular design. And we are working with Worley to put a process design package, a wrapper basically around the technology, key pieces of equipment, the process design package, the flow sheets, and then have a modular design of a plant that is kind of 25,000 tons with two trains in it that could then be kind of cookie cuttered anywhere in the world. And we're co-developing that, and then we will be co-marketing and licensing the technology to potential licensees around the world in various jurisdictions. So that's the model we're working within. And obviously we kicked this thing off earlier this year. We're at a point right now where we have generated the preliminary sales packages, and we are actively reaching out to a number of parties around the world right now that are, in some cases, they were actually already common interests for Worley and Nano One. In some cases, they're new to us. In some cases, they're new to Worley. And these are companies that are have large balance sheets, are very interested in LFP and entering the space, and we are going through the initial stages of due diligence on the capex and the opex of our facilities, on the advantages it has over the Chinese methods, and really the ability to compete effectively in those jurisdictions for Western markets, North American markets, Indo-Pacific region as well. So that gives you a sense. And I think as there's more meat on the bone here as we develop these sales packages, and as we firm up the cost advantages, we will be bringing that information to bear in our sort of publicly accessible marketing material. And we look forward to having that in front of people, because it'll bring more certainty to the advantages that we have. But it's a work in progress, obviously, and will continue to be for some time. But as we make progress, as we hit those milestones, we'll be able to bring more information to your listenership, and obviously to anyone who's interested in Nano One and the Worley Alliance.
Are you able to say something about what it is that attracted Worley to you guys? Why they decided to partner with you?
Well, by combining PCAM and CAM, we reduce CapEx and OpEx and complexity, and so that actually has some significant advantages. We literally cannot copy the Chinese methods for making cathode active materials and replicate it in the West, be that in Europe or North America, because of the waste streams, because of the permitting challenges, and simply because you can't compete on a cost basis if you're doing it the same way the Chinese are. So you have to bring process innovation to the table. So primarily, Worley was attracted to Nano One because of the process innovation. By being able to eliminate all of the water discharge and sodium sulfate discharge, we're able to eliminate all sort of custom engineering, bespoke engineering, and able to make a modular design that can be put anywhere without any really large permitting challenges or custom engineering. So that helps drive down the cost and helps prevent ballooning capex as well, which is plaguing the industry right now. So, I think all of these things help to bring us together.
So the key message here is it's cheaper and it's more environmentally friendly, basically.
Correct. Yes. And less energy intensive as well. So there's obviously a GHG component to that is going to play very well, I think, into Western markets.
And what's the revenue angle here for Nano One? I mean, how would you expect to see this, contributing to the bottom line?
So we've always had a licensing strategy. I think where this is incremental to our licensing strategy. So it's not just about licensing our technology and earning, let's say, dollars per kilogram on the production of cathode materials. We also benefit from from any engineering work that goes on and the sale of any custom equipment. Training and everything else is kind of bundled into that package, brings revenues to Nano One. Some of it will be upfront, so we don't have to wait for the plant to be built and operational. So that's actually sort of a big benefit to Nano One as well. So we're sharing in the revenues with Worley, but ultimately we're sharing a much bigger piece of the pie, and we think we'll be able to sell more plants than we would individually as well. So by and large, we've got front end revenues, we've got kind of back end revenues that are going to be basically production related royalties, and we'll have more of them and larger facilities.
Oh, sounds great. I follow Nano One on LinkedIn as well, and I noticed that you were spending quite some time down in Washington, D.C., or at least shuttling back and forth. So I was less surprised than some people were when the Department of Defense in the US announced that Nano One would be the beneficiary of some considerable funding. I know that's a deal that's only recently been announced. Can you give us some more flavor on that?
Yeah, look, the DO, we've been talking with the DoD for some time. These deals don't happen overnight, that's for sure. And DoD's mandate extends beyond the U.S. borders to free trading countries that obviously supply into the U.S. And their mandate really is twofold. One is they need to power their toys, of course, or the toys that are supplied by their contractors that contract into the defense industry. But they're also, and I think, and even probably a larger part of the mandate is to try and create a wholesome North American supply chain that is decoupled from some of the more insecure supply chains in China and stuff like that. So that's a big part of the mandate. We bring a solution that can be wholly decoupled from China, and I think that's largely what drove the interest from DoD. We do have letters of support from some of their small battery suppliers that are contracted into the DoD, and so we'll be working with them to supply them LFP for those cells. But really, I think the primary motivation here is to drive a decoupled supply chain that can serve the North American market.
I mean, it seems to be a massive stamp of approval for Nano One from a major US agency. I think there's $12 million they're investing.
Yeah, 12.9 million US. So yeah, a sizable chunk of money. It's non-dilutive and non-repayable, which is very nice for us. The way it works, it's basically they reimburse expenses. So as we spend money, we then basically apply for reimbursement, and that and the ticket goes all the way to 12.9 million. It extends over a couple of years, and looks back a couple of months as well, back to when we did put our final application in earlier this year.
That's fantastic. And presumably there was quite an in-depth, intensive due diligence process as part of that for the company.
Definitely a very intense due diligence process. The money, I should mention too, is focused on building on our Candiac facility. That's the facility that we acquired from Johnson Matthey. I think just to remind your listeners, we had that facility was operating for 10 years, making LFP using what's called the hydrothermal method. It's a high pressure, high quality LFP method, but it's had a very large wastewater and sulfate waste stream attached to it, making it very unscalable, really much beyond the capacity they had. When we acquired that facility, we decommissioned all the wastewater and sulfate waste handling, and that was about half the balance of plant there. We decommissioned that. We ripped out a good portion of it that was economical to do so, and then we recommissioned the plant back using the one pot process. We put small reactors in place so that we could do very fast sampling out to companies. We bolted that in through automation into the back end of the plant, which is drying and cooking in their furnace. And the DoD funding that's coming in now is really all about enabling the existing large reactors and re-automating those to be able to bring the plant closer to its design capacity, which is going to be somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 tons a year. And that's what the funds will go towards. And of course, they'll be supporting some of the R&D and support that we do out on the West Coast in Burnaby, just outside of Vancouver.
And apart from the obviously the US Department of Defense, you've also been receiving some additional funding actually inside Canada as well. Could you provide us with some detail on that?
Yes, so we've had lots of funding from the Canadian government and various provincial jurisdictions. So far, if we're looking back to 2014, we've probably accumulated somewhere north of $20 million in Canadian funding over that 8-year period. Some of it in earlier stage R&D work, some of it towards piloting and commercialization, and some of it is directed towards the work we're doing in Candiac right now in the facility just outside of Montreal. So I've had a tremendous amount of support from the Canadian government. We do think that this funding from the DoD notches it up a little bit further, and we are working with both with the Quebec government and the federal government to bring in sort of matching type funding to back that. But and we'll be able to provide more details on that as the sightlines mature.
Oh, great, and you've also been selling off some excess land as well. Is that just cash generative?
Yes. So when we acquired the Johnson Matthey business and facility, that was a $10 million deal for us. That plant was originally built for about 100 million Canadian back in 2012. So a very good purchase for us, not only because of the facility, but the know-how that's in that plant is amazing. The people there started working on LFP back in 2002 and made the world's first commercial ton of LFP right in Quebec. That technology, that the LFP ultimately ended up, growing more organically in China. But we see this as an opportunity to bring it back. That $10 million purchase came with a piece of vacant land neighboring the facility. We did our first FEL2 study, our pre-feasibility study, looking at how we could stuff a cathode factory on that piece of land, but really with no room to expand. We're now looking at this as a piece of land that really is challenged from an expansion point of view. So we sold it off for $5 million. So a remarkable injection of cash for us at this point in difficult markets, and it's non-dilutive in form, and we've got some other irons in the fire on non-dilutive cash generation as well, because all that cash really helps unlock, let's say, the DoD funding and other federal and provincial funding in the Canadian context, all really aimed at trying to bring sort of a non-dilutive approach to funding us through to commercialization.
Yeah, no, I know investors love those words, non-dilutive cash.
Yes.
It's always music to many fund managers' ears. And also, you've got a change in your chairman as well. I saw Paul Matisek stepping down, and you have a new chairman, Anthony, joining you. Can you tell us a bit about both of those guys, especially Anthony, what he's going to be bringing to the Nano One equation?
Yeah, well, let me start with Paul, who's been our chairman for 10 years, and he was actually part of the RTO when we did a reverse takeover back in 2015. He kind of came with the shell. Paul is a veteran in the sort of energy metal space, and quite a legend actually in the Canadian equity markets. Led a whole bunch of different mines and project sales into various markets. In fact, he sold one of his lithium companies to Galaxy, where Anthony C was CEO at the time back. Well, not quite 10 years ago, but not close to that. And that's when I first met Anthony. Anthony was the CEO of Galaxy Resources, which grew to be one of the fourth or fifth largest lithium companies in the world. Eventually acquired by Allchem, and so one of the largest sort of lithium success stories of the last decade. Anthony's track record there has led to his participation in a number of other companies. He knows a tremendous about the public equity markets, of course, and because he really brought a company through an operational phase, selling materials largely into the Chinese markets. He knows the Asian markets extremely well, and that's going to be very important to us moving forward as we try to commercialize cathode production and for that matter, cell production in a North American and Western and European context. So the understanding of that ecosystem is super important to how we build one in the West. So we're very excited to have him on board. I think Paul, having been with us for 10 years, he's ready for retirement, and essentially that's what he's doing. This is all part of a planned exercise. We identified Anthony as very suitable for this really next phase of our business, simply because he's grown companies through commercial success and has a tremendous track record and is very well respected in the industry.
I know that you can't really talk an awful lot sometimes about what's going to be happening in the next 6 months, but I just wanted to finish with asking you whether there is anything you can tell listeners and investors about plans, for the rest of the year and going into 2025 as well.
Well, listen, I think obviously we're going to be building on this DoD investment. Their due diligence, as you mentioned, it confirms not only Nano One technology, but also the emerging market in LFP. I think that's super important. It recognizes Nano One for our deep know-how and all of that. It's also broadly focused on improving energy security, as I said, within a North American context, and there's a lot to build on there. We're super grateful for that, what they've come to the table with. We're super grateful for the Canadian money that we've already seen, as I said, to the $20 million range. And I think Government of Canada has also recognized the emergence of LFP. They've actually put phosphorus and iron on the critical minerals list in Canada, and that's again another strong signal that LFP is going to play an important role in the energy transition moving forward, and it really shows the decisive shift towards LFP that we're seeing. So we have a tremendous opportunity here. We have the only LFP facility outside of Asia in our facility in Candiac. We have the most experienced team outside of Asia who have been working on LFP for almost 2 decades now, and really looking with Worley, with our licensing strategy, we have the ability to attract deep-pocketed partners who are looking for technology and for an entry into the cathode material space and chemical space in batteries. So we look forward to be able to advance some of those relationships and bring all of this in the form of news, obviously, and in the form of progress that we can report on to shareholders and listeners of your podcast.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for your time today, Dan. And listeners, if you want to find out more about Nano One, there is obviously the Nano One website, but also Armchair Trader has a lot of information and updates on the company. So just go to thearmchairtrader.com and search Nano One, and you'll find a lot of material there. But thank you, Dan, for joining us this morning as well and for giving us some of your time.
Much appreciated, Stuart. Thank you for sharing this with the audience. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Armchair Trader podcast. Make sure you visit our website, www.thearmchairtrader.com, for your daily dose of financial markets news and sign up to our free newsletter there.